Now we're going to get into what you do at Flip, I think, especially with AI. We've had a conversation previously with Caro, COO, Taeyong. We talk about AI transformation. And so I'm interested to hear about it. One, from an engineer, and two, from a more Indonesian company. And the whole role of AI. I think your scope is pretty interesting. They could have just gotten you to lead engineer, but then they also added an AI aspect into it. What was that conversation like with Prashus and Saurabh? Well, I guess that was already part of the conversation from the beginning.
So when I came in, I was just head of engineering. Primarily, I was heading the B2B side. So to give folks context, Flip has three divisions, right? One is the consumer side, which is basically your wallet. Like you have money there, you can use it to send it to friends. Make
what the taxi driver showed you.
Yeah, exactly. Make payments, you can top up your electricity bill, e-wallet, all of that. The second one is the B2B side, which I had. And primarily is two things. One is the disbursements that we help out. So you can think of like large groups, 10,000, 20,000 employees, making their salary payouts, for example, use our disbursement tool. And then the second one is a way to accept payment, right? So we support all of the different e-wallet, bank integrations, and QR integrations as well, and the other part. And then the third part of our business is the lending arm, which is Lip. So I had the B2B side, and I'd been doing this for a while. Obviously, given my background in AI, I remember going to Lukman and saying, hey, Lukman, I want to also do things on the AI side, along with Pratyush, right? And so that's how that conversation started. And Lukman was like, sounds good, go for it. Tell us what you need and what you're trying to do. And that led to where we are now. But the first things that we did in terms of AI was we said, let's focus just on the tooling side. And as we started talking to Cursor and trying to have our engineering teams use Cursor pretty significantly, obviously we saw some improvements, but the bigger parts that we saw were on the test engineers. So the test engineers are using it. Typical test coverage was, let's say, 80%. You're trying to expand that to 100%. The delta seems small, but takes a very long time to get. And I said, can we use AI there to close that gap down? So that's one of the big things that we did. Of course, now most of, or actually all of our engineering team uses Cursor, right? That's purely on the tooling side. Second side, which is a very obvious use case for AI, was on the customer support side. And so that's another thing that we started exploring, saying, okay, is there something that we can do there to make all of our customer requests a little bit faster, more efficient, and so on. So the second part that we focused on. A third part obviously comes to what we do as a fintech company. So it's whether it's in terms of risk management, all of that's what we want to continue.
Especially in the lending side.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are like the three overall things that we're doing at Flip in terms of AI. Tooling and customer support, of course, are like very obvious and first use cases. But as we expand into the third use case a little bit more, that will be interesting. I also want to add, really as a part of the third use case, is what we're trying to do currently with data, right? So Flip obviously has a lot of data. You have folks from ops, sales, business, engineering, product, basically trying to say, hey, tell me how much money you made this month. What are the top merchants? How much revenue you make? What is the margin? All of these different things, right? And typically they would come to the data team and say, like, data team, give us all of these numbers, crunch it for us. And there's always like variations of that. Because different account reps handle different accounts. They just want to know some specific attributes. They're not obviously well versed in writing the queries themselves. So now building an AI bot that will enable this for them. So just write it in plain text. And it just goes
kind of internal intelligence to obtain any information that's needed by any.
Exactly. And so that I think has been a pretty big win, and we're building on that. So.
Interesting. And I'm curious to know how have you framed ROI for these types of projects? And obviously we recently featured Flip a few weeks back. Like I think Ari did an interview on Antara or something like that, like 5x growth for the B2B business. So I'm not sure how much of that was AI driven or just your team's like hard work, but how do you pitch some of these ideas from an ROI standpoint, and how do you then measure whether it works or not?
Yeah, so I think specifically for the tooling side, what we did was we said, let's start as a small team. So before we expand this to all of engineering, let's look at the value add for specifically the B2B engineering side. And we saw a pretty big lift in terms of conversion, right? Even if you're saving like 20% of an engineer's time, that's still a lot of value compared to what you're paying for per se. So we said, okay, this is working pretty well, and I really liked what it was doing from a testing standpoint, and that's how we gradually expanded that out. Everything was purely data driven, right? And if Pratyush know this, right? Everything has to be data driven. And so once we saw that value add, I went and pitched it to him, and he said, it's a no-brainer, let's go ahead and do it. That's from a tooling standpoint. Now for the other things, for example, what we're trying to do from a data standpoint, and that is an interesting one, because what we want to measure is how many people have stopped going to the data team to ask these direct requests. That was causing one or two folks from the data team to be dedicated to this, right? And these are all like ad hoc requests. You don't know when it's going to come. They need to keep their sprint cycles for it and so on. So that's the second part. And I think that also is something that we're actively tracking right now. So I think
A lot of those
everything's
like time, cost savings, productivity gains.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And then I guess for the, have you thought already about the third one, the third kind of like use case for the flip as a fintech?
Yeah.
Like how would ROI look for that?
Yeah, so from a risk management perspective, obviously we have rules and engines and everything in place, but going away from the traditional sort of if-else logic or like
Right,
the
right, right.
existing like rule engine that we have with into using some interesting data points that we already have inside Flip and using AI to make that process faster, quicker. That's something else that we are investing in as we speak.
Yeah, you guys have 13, is it 13 million already, or like somewhere about that, 10 to 13 million users, and there's obviously a lot of data per user based on how they use the app and all those things. And obviously when it comes to risk management, there's maybe some variables that would cost much less to obtain, but then you guys could actually use just by virtue of automating a lot of how the data is obtained. Yeah, quite interesting. What advice would you have for leaders listening in who are also on this journey of trying to figure out how to better automate or leverage kind of AI tools?
Yeah, I would always say try it out with a smaller set, because honestly you hear things about AI being 100x productive or any of that. I still feel like we are in an in-between stage where we're using AI to enhance our day-to-day and make it a little bit more efficient. And since that's the stage we're in, look at it from a smaller perspective instead of trying to implement it at a broader perspective. Do it on a small team, see how it works out, see what's working well, what's not. And I was trying to constantly get feedback. And I noticed some basic things, right? Even Cursor, for example, some of the models are really good, right? So if you use Sonnet and Cursor, it's great. If you use some of the other models, not so good in terms of like the thinking, right? So you need to tweak it around and become very good at a prompt engineer, basically. Right. And so you want to get to that good stage. And with the smaller team, it's easy to control. You can see a lot of analytics and stats about it and then expand out from that. Right. I think the tooling is definitely a no-brainer because it definitely adds a value in terms of 10+%. Yes. At that point, it makes a lot of sense to do. Yeah.
Something I always ask our guests is like a make or break moment in their kind of career or journey that they think would be really helpful for our audience to learn from. What do you have that kind of moment that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned both being in big tech as well as startups, obviously the biggest difference is adaptability here in startups, right? And adaptability in startups basically means obviously you have to do what is right in the next 1 week quickly, as opposed to you have an overall North Star, which is still applicable for startups, but every week you're building things to please the customer and finding out what the customer's problems are during that time. So you're quickly trying to solve that. Of course, you still have the vision for 6 months, 1 year, versus obviously in big tech companies where you have broader timelines and you're still trying to solve problems. You're trying to do it to the scale that is actually needed. So I think make or break, I would say, is always be okay stepping out of your comfort zone, right? Whether it's moving from big companies to startups or vice versa, trying to understand what exactly is the value add that you're doing. And one other thing that I want to call out here, which I think recently I learned, is as you step into any company, everyone knows, especially if it's not your own startup, right? You're working for someone. Always try to understand what is the value add that you're bringing to the table. How much are you getting paid, and how can this company make even more money out of it? Right. So this is back to Netflix, where we would think of ourselves as we're a sports team, right? And so you got to figure out who's the best and who do you have to cut. Right. And that's the harsh reality of life. But I think that is something that I've started accepting a little bit more. Right. And I've said, great example here is Lionel Messi moving teams. Why does Miami have to pay so much for him? You got to be a brand where the brand pays for itself. So if you come into a company and say, hey, this is how much you're paying me, but I'm going to save you guys the same amount of money. So basically I'm working for free. Yeah. I think that is a very interesting mindset that I'm thinking of more now. So how do I save costs and build amazing products?
I'm interested to know how that mindset actually influences your leadership style, especially being, I guess for lack of a better term, like a middle manager of sorts, like between the engineers you work with and also trying to align with the management kind of direction. Like how is that mindset that you just described influence that?
Yeah, I think for everything that we invest in, I think we start looking at, okay, what is the ROI here? Purely from either traction that we're getting or amount of time that we're saving or anything else, right? So that's one part of it. Second thing is, this again going back Netflix, but thinking about the keeper test, right? Who do you want to keep on your team who's like an absolute stellar performer, who comes in and says, hey, I'm going to leave tomorrow and you're going to feel bad about it and tell me what I can do to keep you here, right? Because you're an amazing asset to the company. So I think both of those things tie into how you handle teams and how you build teams over time. And again, obviously, every team has like a range of people on that team, but you're working together on a very common goal, right? So exciting the team and making them aware of what is the value add that they're having. I think that also is a huge part of it. So you're thinking of it from a personal perspective as well as from a team perspective. What is the value add that we're bringing together as a team? What is the overall revenue that we are generating as a team? Are we focused on the right ideas? Yeah.
And that actually brings up something that we talked about earlier, which I wanted to also mention on the podcast, which is like how has it been like working here in Southeast Asia versus back in the Valley, like especially from a culture engineering standpoint.
Yeah, I think very different, right? Silicon Valley, I think, again, given that the engineering teams and so on have existed for that long, I think it's you give folks a task, and again, this is going back to Netflix, but you give someone a task, the expectation is it gets done, right? And here, maybe there's a little bit more hand-holding that you need to do in Southeast Asia. But I think talent-wise, there are very good talent pools in Indonesia specifically, right? Like where we work. So you just have to find the right talent and bring them together and drive that mission up. So I don't think there's any lack of talent. It's just you need to look at the right places.
What advice would you have for like founders who are saying that, oh, it's too hard to find talent here, or there's too much competition over the best talent?
Let's talk, because I think I have it figured out. I think you need to go to, obviously Jakarta is a big city, but you need to go to the smaller ones like Bandung, ITB, and some of these other universities producing solid engineers. It really is blowing my mind. And obviously
even in the context of AI.
Absolutely, especially in the context of AI, because I think the engineers coming out now are able to use some of these tools better than engineers probably like me, who've been around for 15, 20 years. And I think they're able to use that and leverage that faster, so they're able to produce code faster. If the ultimate goal is to produce bug-free code and build great products, then how does it matter if it's perfectly fine to use AI to get you there, right? And so they're able to use those tools much better.
Yeah. Awesome. On that note, I would like to thank Tho for coming on the show. We've had quite a discussion about a whole range of topics, and including his own kind of like mini biography.
Yes.
If ever it comes to that point, like we'd love to write your story.
Oh my God. I'm not qualified for that, but yes.
But in any case, at this point in time, really happy to have seen your progress through the IBA program. Great to know that you're working with our portfolio company at Flip, and as you're immersing yourself into Southeast Asia. Yeah. If you guys are, I guess since you're angel investing, like any particular companies, I guess AI startups
that I'm talking to,
or like what specific sectors or use cases are you?
A few of them, but I think they're all like much bigger now. But I think definitely looking primarily at the AI vertical.
Right.
So if
you're building something in AI,
if there's anything that you guys are building that you think I should check out, please feel free to ping me, and I'll definitely take a look, and let's set up some time and talk.
Yeah, I'll leave his LinkedIn in the podcast description or in the post where you found this episode, and make sure to DM him in case you found this call not enough and you want to learn more. So thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Paulo.
Not on call, but in person. So always great.
And this is great. I think beautiful background. This is amazing.
This is not a Zoom background, by the way.
Yeah,
it's an actual background. All right, thanks so much. Yeah,
thank you.
Okay.